Philadelphia. They clashed over immigration, abortion and the economy, among other things.
It's been quite a night, an extraordinary debate at times. And the American pollster Frank Luntz has been watching all of it and joins us now live on Breakfast from New York. Hi, Frank. I mean, I suppose the first thing we have to ask you is who do the American people, the American media, think won this debate?
It's pretty overwhelming that they think that, well, let me be precise. It's not that Harris won, it's that Donald Trump lost. That on several occasions he spoke in language and with ideas that people who were watching were just simply shocked. The idea that some communities are eating their dogs and cats because they have no food. The idea of who's controlling the media, the concept of the corruption that Trump claimed, even going back to the year 2000, 2020, and still pushing the idea that he was robbed of an election that he won. It was not a good night for him. He was off message. His strongest issue, inflation, he constantly was given the opportunity to speak about it, but he chose to talk about other issues. Frankly, I was shocked. It's been 2008, and Sarah Palin was the last national candidate who could represent the following: the more they talk, the more votes they lose.
So that's interesting, because we are quite accustomed now to Donald Trump saying things that are quite surprising, quite shocking, sometimes not true. But does this feel like a step further in that direction?
I was looking at his eyes and watching his facial expressions, and I started to wonder what's going on. Just as we saw Joe Biden, who's a shell of who he used to be, you're looking at Trump, who is simply unhinged. And he was clearly upset by the questions, annoyed by the moderators, and lost the sense of control early in the debate. And Harris baited him repeatedly, and he fell for it. This was not Donald Trump's finest hour.
After the debate, he took the rather unusual step of going into the spin room himself. Normally, that's where his supporters would be trying to influence the debate and say how great their candidate was. But Mr. Trump himself went in. And what do you make of that?
Well, you know, he said that there's one poll that had him winning with 90%, another poll 80%, another poll 70%. Those are his numbers, not mine. And I'd say that they were done by the same people who claim that Elvis Presley is alive and Paul McCartney is dead. It's simply not credible. The journalists were surprised to see him. And I think this is just simply a surprising day all around. Harris stuck to the issues. She did not give specifics. I believe the public does not know more about her today than they did yesterday. So she hasn't closed the deal. But the way it works with the remaining undecided this far into a campaign is that they first have to decide who they're not voting for, and then they make a commitment for who they're voting for. And I believe that they've decided as of last night that they're not going to vote for Donald Trump, but they're not defined voters yet because they're not yet ready to commit themselves to the Vice President Harris.
How did she present herself? Because we know from some polling that she's just not been visible enough, that the American electorate don't necessarily know who she is, what she stands for. How did she present?
Well, she presented by explaining her priorities, which in itself is a good thing. Knowing what her priorities are helps voters know how they're going to be impacted by them. However, she said we need to bring down housing prices, but never described how. We need to address inflation for health care and food and fuel, never gave details. In fact, throughout the entire debate, she spoke in generalities and assumptions without any of the details that undecided voters are looking for. Now, make no mistake, in the end, people tend to vote about the persona of the candidate, whether they like them and trust them, and whether they think that candidate understands them and their concerns and their fears. And the segment that matters most are paycheck-to-paycheck voters, people who are genuinely struggling. She didn't tell them anything, but at least she didn't make it worse on herself by suggesting things that could not have been true and by peddling theories and conspiracies that will undermine Trump's ability to win the undecided vote. I thought that Tonight, I would have given Harris a B-, and I would have given Donald Trump a D+. I don't know if that translates to British audiences, but Harris clearly bested Trump. He fell for it again and again. And I don't know if there's going to be another debate after this one.
OK, so that was one night. There's 50-something days to go before Election Day. You study the polls in great detail. You'll be looking at the numbers after this debate. Right now, if the election was called, who do you think would win?
I have no doubt it would be Kamala Harris. But I do have doubt whether she is absolutely positively destined to win. There are only 7 states that matter. And because you're a British audience, I won't go into it. But the key is it's not the popular vote that matters. It's these individual states. And they're tied. They're essentially tied in all 7 states. She will benefit from tonight, but not significantly because there aren't enough votes to move over. This is not like the last British election, where it was clear that it was going to be a landslide from day one. In fact, it is clear that even with this debate, even with a great convention that she had, the likelihood is that she'll be ahead by maybe 4 points a week from now when the polling settles down. Guess what? 4 points is not enough to guarantee victory in the American presidential contest.
That will keep us watching. A+ for your analysis there, Frank.
Thank you.
That does translate across the pond. Frank Luntz, their political consultant and pollster from Washington.